What if the one rule you refuse to break is the very thing that could get you killed? To understand Sanji, you have to look beyond the kicks, the confidence, and the charm, and step into the internal code that defines him. Because Sanji is not just fighting enemies, he is constantly fighting the world itself to protect a set of values that refuse to bend, even under pressure. In a chaotic world like One Piece, where survival often demands compromise, Sanji stands as a contradiction, a man who would rather lose a fight than lose himself. From the outside, his chivalry seems simple. A man who refuses to harm women, who protects others, who carries himself with a sense of honor. But psychologically, this is not just a preference, it is identity. Sanji's code is not something he follows, it is something he is. And that distinction is critical. When values become identity, breaking them doesn't feel like making a mistake, it feels like destroying yourself. That's why, even when his life is on the line, Sanji refuses to compromise. Because to him, survival without identity is meaningless. This is where the tension begins. The world Sanji lives in does not reward principles. It rewards power, strategy, and adaptability. Pirates cheat, manipulate, and exploit weakness. Strength often belongs to those willing to cross lines others won't. And yet, Sanji chooses to impose limits on himself, limits that make him vulnerable in battle. Psychologically, this is fascinating, because most people, when placed in high-pressure environments, abandon their values to survive. Sanji does the opposite. He holds onto his values tighter, not because it's easy, but because it's the only way he knows how to remain whole. But where does this come from? Why would someone choose a path that makes life harder instead of easier? The answer lies in his past. Sanji's childhood was not defined by freedom. It was defined by control, rejection, and emotional isolation. Growing up in an environment where he was treated as inferior, where compassion was seen as weakness, Sanji developed something rare, a deep sensitivity to suffering. Instead of becoming cold like those around him, he chose to protect what they rejected: empathy, kindness, and respect. His chivalry is not just a rule about women, it is a rebellion against the cruelty he experienced. This is why his identity is so rigid. When you grow up in an environment that tries to strip away your humanity, the parts of yourself you manage to keep become sacred. For Sanji, his values are not negotiable because they were hard-earned. They were forged in opposition to a world that tried to reshape him. So when he refuses to fight a woman, it is not about weakness. It is about preserving the very core of who he is. And this is where the psychological conflict intensifies. Because in moments of chaos, real danger, real stakes, values are tested. It's easy to have principles when there is no cost. It's much harder when those principles put your life, your crew, or your mission at risk. Sanji faces this dilemma repeatedly. Does he break his code to win, or keep his code and risk losing everything? This is not just a physical battle. It is an internal war between survival and identity. Most people, when pushed far enough, will compromise. They justify it. They adapt. They say, just this once. But Sanji doesn't. And that reveals something deeper about his psychology. He does not see his values as flexible. He sees them as absolute. This kind of thinking is rare, and it comes with both strength and danger. The strength is clarity. He never hesitates about who he is. The danger is rigidity, the inability to adapt when the situation demands it. But here's the paradox. This rigidity is also what makes him powerful. Because in a world where everyone bends, the person who refuses to bend becomes unshakable. Sanji's enemies may exploit his code, but they can never break his spirit. His strength does not come from physical dominance alone. It comes from certainty. The certainty that no matter what happens, he will not betray himself. And that kind of conviction is something even the strongest opponents struggle to overcome. Sanji represents the question: what is the value of strength if it costs you your identity? In many ways, he challenges the traditional definition of power. Because power is often seen as the ability to win, to dominate, to survive at any cost. But Sanji redefines it. For him, true strength is the ability to remain true to yourself, even when the world pressures you to change. Even when it hurts. Even when it costs you. This makes him one of the most psychologically complex characters in One Piece. He is not driven purely by ambition like others. He is driven by alignment. The need to ensure that his actions match his values. And when those two things are aligned, a person becomes incredibly powerful, because they are no longer divided internally. There is no hesitation, no internal conflict, no second guessing. There is only action, guided by principle. But that doesn't mean he doesn't struggle. In fact, his struggle is constant. Because every time he refuses to compromise, he is forced to face the consequences. Pain, loss, risk, and yet he continues. Not because he is unaware of the consequences, but because he has already decided what matters more. And that's what makes Sanji different. He is not just protecting others, he is protecting a version of himself that the world tried to erase. His chivalry is not about being noble for the sake of appearance. It is about holding on to humanity in a world that rewards cruelty. It is about choosing identity over survival, values over convenience, and principle over power. So when you watch Sanji fight, you're not just watching a battle. You're watching a man defend something invisible, something internal, something most people lose without even realizing it. And the real question his story forces us to ask is this: in a world that constantly pressures you to change, to compromise, to bend, would you still protect your values, even if it cost you everything?